Innovation starts with ideas, but long-term competitiveness depends on something deeper: governance, leadership, and the ability to turn ambition into action. That's why we turn to Sanna Suvanto-Harsaae, a highly experienced board chair and advisor across multiple Nordic companies. Sanna brings a distinct perspective from the boardroom, where complex strategies must be simplified into clear, actionable directions, and where tough questions must be asked to ensure businesses stay on track. Sanna's perspective is crucial for understanding how governance, clarity, and culture can make or break a business's ability to innovate, and how Nordic businesses, with their tradition of openness and collaboration, can turn these strengths into a competitive edge.
The biggest governance challenge for Nordic companies, specifically in the board level, is to ensure that we do the governance, the risk part as needed, but we make sure that we focus on building the businesses for now and for long term. And in a sense of crisis, you very often get short-termed. But the board's biggest responsibility to ensure is that you have a both short-term performance, but you also have a long-term development of the company. The issue in a very uncertain times is that the uncertainty eats up or takes over your innovation. So your innovation gets stopped or gets put on the back gear, or it's not focused. Whereas sometimes that's exactly what you need. You can use the crisis you have as a burning platform to actually force more innovation, saying, listen guys, now we have to do innovation. And that's something the board can help by putting that on focus. The operative management is very often involved on the daily operations, and it can be difficult to see a bit further on in the future. And that's one of the biggest roles that boards have, is to ensure that you look further in the future than the operative management can. And thus the board has a key role to ensure that innovation happens, even in times of a lot of other type of turbulence. In uncertain times, one of the key things that boards have to do is to ensure simplicity. Fewer, bigger, better. And if you ask more questions and you keep giving more jobs for the management, that is the absolutely road for catastrophe. One of the board's key roles is to ask the questions, but they have to be the right questions. It's not about questions of asking just questions for sake of questions, or adding questions or adding things to do for the board and the management. However, what is really important is that we ask the questions about innovation. Because if the board does not ask the questions about innovation, where are we in our innovation plans during a crisis, it is quite high likelihood the operational management don't have time to think about it in a daily business. A lot of companies can survive short-term without innovation, but that's a short-term. Most of the companies are here for long-term. And for long-term, you cannot have a situation where you don't have an innovation or big investments. And you have to have innovation and investment if you want to be here in long-term. So there is a danger on the time of crisis that you think, oh, innovation can wait. And then when you wake up after the big crisis or the acute crisis over, then suddenly you say, oh no, we are now behind the schedule on our innovation, we're behind our competition. Innovation can wait for a short while, but innovation cannot be stopped if the company wants to stay there forever. I think innovation is actually a responsibility for everybody in the company. And people don't think it that way, because you often think innovation as the radical innovation, that the big bang. Whereas innovation, as its best, happens on everyday business. I can tell you a little story, and then you can cut this out, but I can tell you a little story when I was very early in my career, and I was leading a group that we had both an innovation board, a cross-functional. The same afternoon, we had a cost-cutting board, again, cross-functional. And all these two things we were doing at the same time. So same morning, first we were driving innovation, and in the afternoon we was driving at how can we do things more effectively. Now, this was everybody's role on these two groups was to drive innovation. Because also cutting costs is innovation, but also improving the product is innovation. So innovation is everybody's job in the organization. But there has to be a focus for innovation. And if the board does not focus to certain points, they sometimes have a tendency to disappear in the organization. Top management is there to to ensure you have results now. Board's role is to ensure you also have results in the future. Innovation is absolutely key that you can both perform now and in the future. The best thing the Nordics has is our people. It is an untapped opportunity, global versus globally. It's a highly educated people. It's people who have a democratic perspective, a democratic soul on that sense. And to be very honest, they're not very highly paid. This is something we're not supposed to say very high up, but in the global competition, that's what it is. If we could get more use out of this raw material, I sometimes cry when I see how little we get of the big people and the fantastic people mass we have in the Nordics. It is really our global edge, and we should take much better care of that one and use it much better. The Nordic companies are very well known for a very low hierarchy. Sometimes we think we have a lot of hierarchy in the Nordic companies, but it's nothing compared to the big global companies. So the Nordic non-hierarchical thing, the very democratic, the very open, you can challenge your bosses, has a way that the innovation actually can live much better. We sometimes don't take use of it because we think too small. In the Nordics, we still think not Nordics, we think different countries. But if we would take a Nordic perspective and just get the Nordic differences playing, I think we could get much better out of our innovation than we could get today. Perspective for me actually means constructive conflict. And with constructive conflict, I mean that in today's world, when so much is happening, by asking different questions, by getting different perspectives, you will end up with a better solution. And the constructive conflict comes from the fact that if you have a little bit of tough situation, tough discussion, you really get to the essence. And that ensures you a much better solution than just doing what the first person said. I think Nordics are about the 8th or 10th biggest economy globally. I think if we could really get that collaboration going also more intensively within the companies to really act as a one area and an ecosystem within that company ecosystem we have in the Nordics. That would give us a huge power and possibility to be much more innovative and come with the new things. At the moment, we're working too much on one by one in our little ecosystems around our little universities instead of looking this whole Nordic approach that would give us much more and much quicker.
Innovation is fragile without clarity. It's not enough to have big ideas. You need structures that support learning, leadership that invites challenge, and a culture that stays curious rather than getting stuck in the past. For Nordic businesses, this is a reminder that our competitive edge comes not just from what we create, but how we lead. By fostering a governance culture that values questions over assumptions, and by staying connected across sectors, we create the space for innovation to thrive.